It's nice to see people here to watch the process. Attendance has been taken. Approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Pierce, seconded by Councillor Coleman. Any additions, any conversation, anything to discuss? Call a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Declaration of pecuniary interests. Anyone have them? There's only one item really that we're going to be talking about tonight, so I can't imagine that there are any. Delegations, there aren't any. Staff report 5A. Michael Bradley.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just before Council begins its debate, I just wanted to introduce the topic. The Mayor and I discussed this previously. So just as a reminder, there is a covering report this evening, Report Council 1901, our first report of the Council year. It is authored by Ms. Dale, but a number of contributors at staff. It, as well as providing some additional new information that I'll touch on, also provides a list of all the previous reports which are included on your agenda this evening for your information and to assist you with the decision. The decision at hand this evening is on whether to opt in to permit retail cannabis sales in the community or to opt out and not permit retail cannabis in the community. Just as a reminder, if Council wishes to opt out and not allow retail cannabis in the community, then there is a resolution that our solicitor prepared back a month and a half ago or so, and it is on page 9. And that resolution would need to be moved, seconded, and voted on and approved if Council wishes to opt in. The default position, if you make no decision this evening and no decision prior to, I believe, January 22nd, then the county will have been assumed to have opted in. It will be considered to have opted in. Now, that would not preclude Council this evening from passing a resolution to verify that it wishes to opt in, but that is Council's decision. So I trust that all makes sense to the members of Council. We've been talking about this for a good month and a bit now. So the report on this evening's agenda does include a little bit of information. It does talk about some limits on retail licensing that was proposed by the province, I think, since our last meeting or just around the time of our last meeting. So initially there are a limited number of licenses that will be lotteried out. It also, the report notes there were some questions about the ability to pass a smoking bylaw. And there is information there on the different options, noting that there are some limitations to that as well in the Council's abilities under the Municipal Act to approve a smoking bylaw. So, Your Worship, that's just some quick comments on what's before you this evening. And Ms. Zudema and myself, as well as Robin, we're here to answer any questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, how do you want to start this? Question, Councillor House.
Question about the first wave of retail, the lottery for the April time frame. We've received information that clearly states that in the first wave, there will only be 25 stores in the province of Ontario, 7 east of Toronto, and none in municipalities with less than 50,000 people. My question is, have we seen any indication from the other governments on when the second wave is? Is it in June or is it in December, or we don't? Is there any clarification on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I checked on the websites earlier today. There's no indication as to the timeline with respect to that potential second wave. In the regulation itself, this is the one that was passed in December following the date of my report, but around the same time as the last meeting. It speaks to this is the new section that was added, section 8.1, subsection 2. It says no more than 25 retail store authorizations may be issued and in effect at any given time. Okay, that's the language of the regulation. Later in that same regulation, under section 12, it states on December 13th, which was the same date that this regulation came into force, the regulation is amended by adding the following section. The registrar shall refuse to issue a retail store authorization if the applicant already holds 75 retail store authorizations. So, you know, the regulation itself contemplates a maximum of 75 stores per licensee, but at the same time indicates that 25 are in place at any given time. So this is why I think there is this notion of a second wave that may be available to licensees. No timeline has been indicated, and the fact that they use the word at any given time might require amendment at some later time.
Councillor Ferrier?
Just another question, a clarification through you, Mr. Mayor. When we're looking at the monies that will be coming in if we choose to opt in, we understand there was some confusion last time we met on this specific issue. My current understanding is that if we do not opt in, we will not receive the potential excise tax in the future, the share of that. And I was just chatting with somebody from Six Nations who was telling me that one tobacco company paid $240 million in excise tax recently. Imagine if cannabis ends up having the same sort of success that tobacco's had, and not being a part of that. And two, that the piece around dealing, the monies that would be around dealing with enforcement are far lower if we don't opt in. And we will be dealing with enforcement issues whether we opt in or out, because communities around us will be opting in, and we still deal with the black market. Is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, my discussions with our treasurer indicated that the first payment that was due to the county was supposed to be received in early January. No specific date was identified. I had thought that perhaps that first installment would have actually been provided by today's meeting. I didn't hear of anything today when I spoke with her. With respect to this, it's the second piece that I think is up in the air, given the opt-in or opt-out provision. My understanding is that amount is nominal if one doesn't opt in. Mm-hmm. And I think there was some conversation, without getting into any confidential discussion, about whether it was worthwhile to opt in, which is not reversible, for the sake of a certain amount of funding that would be available as a second installment. So my understanding is that first installment was due to the county no matter what.
Okay, but I received information from another source that said that it does only occur for the first or second installment. And yes, it's nominal, but it's tens of thousands of dollars over years, if we do opt in. So I'm just wondering, again, maybe we just both have unsure information.
Yeah, pulled size. It's to be allocated across the entire province. I don't have a specific number to provide you as to what the county would actually receive. And with respect to the enforcement issue, that was another part of your question. Mm-hmm. That would be something that the county would have to deal with at some point. But the penalties that are imposed under the regulation for convictions, it's $250,000 for a corporation or $100,000 for an individual. They seem like large amounts, and those might be available to a municipality if they pursue those enforcements. However, the catch is collecting on those fines, and that's always been a bit of a difficulty for other matters in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In order to get the discussion, we as a council, and indeed the previous council and the one before that, have as a strategic priority to ensure that the community is healthy, safe and progressive. Well, I can understand that if we opt in, we're being a bit progressive, but I'm also interested in the healthy and the safe bit. So we need a balance in this decision. Municipalities have a responsibility. It's in the Municipal Act that we are responsible for the health, safety and welfare of persons. So we need to go beyond, in my view, the provincial Smoke-Free Ontario Act. I'll come back to that in a second. I referenced Vic Fedeli. He's the finance minister for the province. He stated that municipalities will have the power to pass bylaws restricting where people can smoke. And smoking of the product, the impact on people who are not smokers, the impact of people who are not users, is where I think we need to think about the balance. We should see recreational cannabis on a par with smoking on the one hand, but it's actually on a par with alcohol consumption on the other. We don't allow alcohol consumption in the streets or on the sidewalks. This is behind my concern about smoking in public places. And I noticed that in the staff report, you raised a concern that we may not be able to exercise any effective control. But my reading of the Municipal Act, Section 115, says municipalities may define public places. So it would appear that we have flexibility to define where people smoke or don't smoke. And we keep that balance between people that want to smoke, they can smoke at home. People that don't want to be involved in cannabis smoke or anywhere around it can be certain that they're not going to run across it in the street. Recreational cannabis is legal, and I think we have the obligation to try to make it as safe as possible for everybody, users and non-users. So as such, I'm in favor of better regulation of the sale and quality of the cannabis product. Having seen the Emblem factory, I'm confident that there is a regulatory system in place which will guarantee the quality. And if we don't supply the product, then people will go somewhere else to buy the product and they can use it in our community. Regulated retail stores will definitely assist in maintaining that quality of product. And I believe that even though if we opt in, we are committed, I believe that the early experience from these first 25 stores will actually benefit us. I'm sure that everyone will be looking very hard to see how these things work, and there will be a change, if necessary, to the regulations to reflect the experience that people have. So I'm not concerned that we are opting in without having some opportunity to see some change later. From my conversations with people in Ward 3 and others, the balance of opinion is marginally for opting in. So I would offer my vote to opt in, but in parallel, I would want to see a smoking bylaw that restricts the smoking of cannabis in public places in the county.
Councillor Howes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just one thing I wanted to add, that was very well delivered. I agree with all of it. I just wanted to underscore the part about the bylaw. Regardless of how this vote ends up tonight, we need to put the effort into the bylaw to make everyone clear on the boundaries around where they can enjoy their cannabis product. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Okay, so I think I've made my position fairly clear on this, but that's what tonight's meeting is all about, so I'll reiterate my position. First of all, I do understand that cannabis is legal now. I understand that. I also understand that we have manufacturers of medical marijuana in the county. I totally understand that. I understand that the aspect of the legal outlets is to try and deter the underground sale of cannabis. Will it eliminate it? I don't believe it will. Will it deter it some? Possibly. I understand that there's 25 licenses going to be given out initially. It is under a lottery. We opt in, we're in this lottery. We may not be chosen. We may not win the lottery anyway, if you want to call it a win. Also, I understand that when you opt in, you are in. You cannot get out. They talk about the money that will be coming from the government in regards to those that do opt in. Is that going to balance the extra police presence that might be necessary? We don't know. There are so many unknowns with going forward with this. My stance before was if we opt out at this point in time, we can still opt in at a later point. I'm standing by the same sense in the aspect of there's too many unknowns to this. I understand that talking to a lot of people that I've spoken to, it is around a 60-40 split of those that want to opt in. There's also the stating in there that no municipalities under 50,000 will be put into the lottery per se. We're not at 50,000 yet, but I mean, all we have to do is look around the county. We're going to be there very soon. So if we were to choose to opt in at this point, we're under the 50,000. We're going to be there before we know it. Again, I understand the fact of the aspect of if we sell it in the county, people won't be going elsewhere, purchasing it, coming back into the county. You could look at that, excuse me, in the sense of alcohol. If we look at our beer store in town, our liquor store in town, the hours that they're open, there are liquor stores, beer stores elsewhere, I will take Brantford for example, that are open later than that. So if somebody wants to purchase alcohol when our stores are closed, they go to Brantford, they purchase it, and they come back. At the end of the day, if everything's closed, people go to a bootlegger. That's not going to stop it either. That hooks back to the underground. Again, I'm sticking by my point that at this point in time, I feel that there's too many unknowns. At this point, we will learn things. Yes, we may learn things on these first 25, but let's play the what if. Let's play the what if that all of a sudden this second wave comes 6 months down the road. As was stated earlier, we don't know when the second wave is going to come in. That could put us in a position that we may not want to be in. I feel that it's best for our interest that we opt out at this point in time. We understand in the first 6, 8, 10, 11 months what happens to this. We have a year to opt in if we do opt out. And at that point in time, if everything is unfolding like we think it will, opt in at that point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pierce. Councillor Ferrier.
Just on that piece about, and through you, Mr. Mayor, on that piece around police and justice and addiction, I think I may be the only person around the table who's worked in addictions, who's worked in counseling and mental health, and worked with the justice system, training, etc. We had, and not everybody's on the committee that we were here yesterday, the Community Services Committee. The police did speak to marijuana since legalization and said they literally had 4 calls about it since it's been legal. It's not, and in their words, it's not been a major impact on calls, etc. I do think, and I have 2 points I want to get out there in the discussion. One, I think it's a tad bit hypocritical as a county to be a major producer of cannabis and not allow retail. We have one manufacturer in town, in our ward, Ward 2, and we've already approved 3 other major grow operations. To do that, and if it's good enough to sell, if it's good enough to grow, it should be good enough to sell. And I think that's something that we have to look at as a council in the future, if we're saying no to retail, yet yes to so much manufacturing of it. And the other piece is that we have received a lot of input from people, most of it towards wanting to opt in. One of the things that I look at is, yes, there are some folks with some legitimate concerns around opting out, most of it around legalization, which we can't deal with here, and the other piece around smoking in public, which we're going to try and deal with either way. However, I know 2 groups of people that are also against, that hope that we drag our feet on this and don't opt in, 2 groups being drug dealers and biker gangs, and I don't want to side with them on this issue, right? They are hoping that we don't allow for legitimate areas of retail. They're hoping that the black market can stay large and thriving, and that more municipalities opt out. And we've had some controversial issues around biker gangs in this community, and this is what they do, folks. Right? This is what they want to do. So these are things that we need to look at when we look at safety. And yes, it can sound hyperbolic to say it this way, but working in the field I work in, it's true. And these are things that we also have to enter into the conversation before we vote. Thank you.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think I made my position clear at one of our previous meetings as well. And because we're under 50,000, we won't be in the first round of the lottery, so that gives us some time. However, I'm not sure how long it takes to grow a good crop of cannabis. I don't think it will be long before the supply chain catches up with the demand. And I think that when it does catch up, then there'll be more licenses coming forward. And the fact that disturbed me more this week was when I heard you pay your $75 and you can apply for a license to have a retail cannabis outlet. Then Minister Fedeli was on the television stating, oh, well, they have to have a business plan and they have to do this and they have to do that. So that was a little more reassuring, because the previous plan, when they were going to be, the shops were going to be a division of the LCBO, was more comforting to me than the current plan. However, I am, as a member of the Impaired and Distracted Driving Committee, we've looked at this issue quite a bit and talked about what's happened in Colorado. It's been legal there for 4 years, and I cannot support at this time having retail stores in our county. I also think about the healthy part of our mission that Councillor Bell mentioned, and the health unit and other health professionals have stated that people under 25 are young people. Cannabis smoking affects their brain. And I don't know, in good conscience, I cannot support something in our community that affects our young people, their brain. I know it's available, they can buy it online, but to make it more readily available at this time with everything so rushed, I just can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheat.
Just so that people all around the table know how I'm going to be voting, I'll be voting out.
Thank you, Councillor Wheat. Councillor Bahouse.
Excuse me. Just one more statistic to pull out of yesterday's community services meeting. The head of our police force, Lisa Anderson, referenced a recent traffic stop that resulted in a fentanyl capture and charges laid, and it was very eye-opening. I believe the car had black market cannabis and fentanyl in it, and the statistic that she gave us that was scary was that if you took a fentanyl capsule or pill that was the size and you cut it into 324 pieces, each piece has enough dangerous chemical in it to kill a person. If somebody somebody I know who is going to buy cannabis, if they buy it from the underground drug market, there's a chance that cannabis has come into contact with other drugs like fentanyl, and that scares me. If they buy it from a retail store that's been supplied by Emblem or anybody else, there's zero chance of that happening. Thank you.
Any other comments? Speaking, our obligation for health and welfare too, I believe the same thing. I believe that if you're going to buy cannabis in the county of Brant, we have an obligation to make sure that cannabis is clean. It hasn't been laced with anything, because we spend a lot of our time promoting our recreational facilities and our canoeing and the trails and the paths, and I don't know how much you know about seizures and drug-induced mishaps, but I mean, if these kids do buy cannabis in the county and then decide to get in a canoe and have a seizure because the cannabis has been laced with something, I mean, there's zero chance of them surviving when they're on a trail or a path or on a bike with their heart rate accelerated, or in a canoe where they're absolutely on their own. So I think that our obligation, I mean, the cannabis ship, as we say, has sailed, so it's not about cannabis anymore. It's not up to us, it never was. We just have to make sure if they're buying it in the county of Brant, that it be clean. It might get them high, but it won't kill them. And that's my vote, and I will be voting to go in, so, to step in, so. I don't know whether someone wants to make a motion and you want to get this thing done and over with, or if there's any more. Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, just a couple more comments as to the discussion that's been had around here. First of all, there was a statement that we'd be almost hypocritical if we were to vote no to this when we have manufacturers in our county. I want to make it perfectly clear. I'm not saying that we are voting no to this. What I am saying is not at this time. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, the problem is that everybody, the general population, as well as potentially people around this table, don't understand the fact that if we opt into this, part of the thing is we have no say in where the stores go. If it's zoned commercial and it's 150 meters away from a school, it can go there. And then one quote in the documentation we got is, the government may, that is may, it was written in the document, may advise us that there's going to be a store there. They don't have to. Again, I'm hoping that with some time, they'll kind of lax off with that and give the municipalities more power as to where these outlets can go. Again, is it going to happen? I believe it is. But I'm just simply saying that my stance is the fact I'm not saying no, I'm saying not right now. Let's understand what's going to happen first and base our judgment and our decision on that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Coleman?
Well, we've had a lot of interesting conversation on this tonight, and I have really got mixed feelings on this whole issue, and I sit here and I think I got grandkids, and I think what you said, Mr. Mayor, and whatnot, and I think what everybody else has said too, but I'm really leaning to saying no with the option of going in a year's time or whatever. Let's see where this shakes out right now with the province. I think it is legal. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, and I'm not making light of anybody that is growing it. I've had it grown in Ward 5 for at least 5 years.
25 years.
Well, no, illegally 25 years, but I know where it is. I know there is a problem, but I think I'm leaning towards opting out with the option of going in a year's time, and that's what I'm going to support. And I'll put that on the floor right now so we can move on this discussion. Making that a motion, seeking a seconder.
Councillor Pierce? I'll second that. Could you read the motion, please?
Certainly, Your Worship. So I assume that Councillor Coleman is going for the recommendation contained in staff report CD. Okay. So I will read the motion for everyone's indulgence. Whereas the Government of Canada has passed the Cannabis Act, which also was known as Bill C-45, as a law that, having come into effect on October 17, 2018, legalized the recreational use of cannabis nationwide in Canada, when combined with Bill C-46, an act to amend the Criminal Code of Canada. And whereas the Province of Ontario has passed the Cannabis Act 2017, which has come into force on October 17th, 2018, and whereas the Province of Ontario has directed that municipalities must decide by January 22nd, 2019, if they wish to choose to opt out of permitting physical cannabis retail stores as of April 1st, 2019 within their municipality, and whereas the Government of Ontario has indicated that if a municipality chooses to opt in, there is no subsequent opportunity to opt out. That the County of Brant advised the Province of Ontario that the County of Brant is opting out of permitting physical cannabis retail stores within the county, and that the clerk forward this resolution forthwith to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario and the Ministry of Finance to confirm that the County of Brant will not permit cannabis retail stores to be located within its boundary.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Can we still have discussion on it? Anything else that anyone wants to say before we call the vote? Councillor Chambers?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll express my opinion. I I'm not going to support the motion. It's not that complicated for me. I made up my mind a long time ago. It's a legal product, and there's a regulatory regime in place that is there to protect the consumer. It's good enough for me.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Miller?
I'll just quickly give my 2 cents, Mr. Mayor. It's a very divisive issue. I think we all realize that. If you've read the paper today, there's a letter supporting it and there's a letter against it. We come in tonight, we have an addendum, there's a letter supporting it, there's one against it. My mother is against it, my father is for it. So I've got emails that support it and emails that are against it. So I think no matter which way we vote, it's a lose-lose for us.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Any other comments? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if we pass this motion, as Councillor Coleman said, it doesn't mean that we can not reconsider in a year or more's time when they've sorted everything out. I don't think that money should be an issue here, although we're not going to receive enough, in my opinion, to deal with the bylaw enforcement and policing of this matter. But the money that the province is offering us shouldn't be a consideration, because our young adults in our community and other communities are more important. Their health and is more important than money. And if they want to get legal, clean cannabis, they can get it readily online. They can order it. And that's just my last words, and I'd like a recorded vote, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Councillor House.
And just a little bit in response to Councillor Gatward's point, and I'll try to make this my last word on it too. Obviously, I'm not in favor of voting out. I only know 2 people who've ordered cannabis online. Now, neither was in this community, but in both cases, the product arrived to their home and was delivered without any proof of identification, without any proof of age. So it helps me reinforce my rationale that the current system is broken and needs a better system, which I believe retail sale contributes to. Pardon?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
The only other thing was, pardon me, like I respect anyone who says, hey, wait a year till it's this less messy. I absolutely get that rationale. I understand it. I respect it. I'm not sure that a year from now it's going to be any less messy. Thank you.
Okay, I also don't understand why we would wait a year when we've already said that our population can't grow that fast in a year for us to even qualify. So I don't know why we would want to opt out after we've opted in, just because, as Councillor Gatward said, the responsibility of the health of the kids in the neighborhood are our responsibility, and we have to guarantee the purity so that they're buying what they think they're buying. I mean, everyone thinks they're buying something sometimes, and they get duped, and something's not as it appears or not as it's advertised. In the world of Kijiji and Google and all kinds of things, everyone's being taken and paying for things that they thought they were getting and not getting. And I think we can't control all of that, but we can certainly control all of this and say that anyone that buys cannabis in the county of Brant, it will be as clean as it's been advertised as, and the kids are not going to die and have things crop up that they weren't expecting. They'll get the buzz that they were expecting and that they paid for, but they're not going to go into cardiac arrest when they aren't in arm's reach of medical assistance. So I think it's our duty, and I've said it, I won't say it the third time. So we're going to ready to call the vote. Councillor Coleman. Push that button, there you go.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now you've got my dandruff up with that last statement. And I'll tell you why. Because you said our kids won't die. Well, I understand they won't die if it's laced. But our kids won't die if they drink alcohol in moderation either. And somebody goes out and whether they had too much marijuana or whatever and in a car crash, it's no different than alcohol. So that statement that you just made bothered me. Now I'm really for sure that I am voting no.
Perfect, and I'm glad you brought up alcohol, because I would suggest that you should be more concerned about the placement of the beer store to the high school. As Mr. Pierce says, you know, we have no control as to where these cannabis stores are going, but surely to God, they're not going to be any closer than the Paris High School to the beer store, where you can walk over at lunch, buy a case of beer, and go down by the river and get pie-eyed. So I would suggest to you, I'm glad you brought it up, because you've made my point even more crystal clear. Any other comments? We're going to call the vote. It's a recorded vote. So we're voting on Councillor Coleman's motion to opt out. All those in favor? All those opposed? Mr. Clerk? The motion's defeated. All right. So, with the motion being defeated, is there another motion that needs to be put on the floor?
Through your worship, it's my understanding that you do not need to make a motion to opt in. You have made a motion a motion to opt out has been made. It has been defeated, and the default position of the municipality will be to opt in at this point. And I see consensus from our solicitor at the back. So
I would still like to see if anyone would like to make a motion to opt in.
I was hoping to make a motion to ask staff for a report on what other municipalities are doing around smoking bylaw ahead of opting in and municipal retail locations. I think having a comparative document where we can look at what places in the region are doing, communities in the region, as well as best practices. We did receive a number of emails from people giving us bylaws from Alberta and other places around this to help strengthen that piece that I do think is a legitimate concern that people do have, especially if it, as it appears, we're opting in. So I'd like to make a motion on that if possible and seek a seconder.
Second, Councillor Bell.
A point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
The agenda was set. The topic of the agenda was whether to opt in retail or not. Okay. Motion bylaw. There's no notice, and I'm not prepared to go into discussion at this time without having had the notice, and I think the correct ruling would be to rule the motion out of order. There's the opportunity to place the motion at the appropriate time, but this is not the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers.
Is that true? Just a clarification, point of clarification. Is that true on a request to staff for a report? Because I'm not actually asking to approve a smoking bylaw. I'm asking for a report from staff.
Councillor Chambers?
If you want my opinion, the agenda was set. Is there anything on the agenda with regard to a smoking bylaw? No. Therefore, it is inappropriate to discuss an item that's not on the agenda at this time. You can put forward, excuse me, I'm not finished. Notice of motion on in a proper meeting. The other reason for the it being deemed out of order is this is a special council meeting for a special purpose, which was what was listed on the agenda. You cannot add things to a special meeting off the cuff. I understand what you want to do, but it's just not the appropriate time to do it.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers.
I would like to just assure the public that I think members of this council will be bringing a motion like that into call in the future, because there will be a lot of discussion, and I think it's okay to reassure the public that we will take steps on other portions of this debate and issue.
Thank you. Okay, so we're finished. We're finished 5A. 5B is just going to be received, a motion to receive as information. Councillor Pierce? Yeah, seconded by Councillor Howes. Okay, all those in favor of just, thank you for the addendum. Any other communication? Any other business? Nothing for in camera? Next meeting will be the regular council meeting. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Coleman, Councillor House. Thank you. We stand adjourned.
Really? I thought she always does it. Okay.